Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I just want to mention Ms. Brest has approached me that her opening presentation solely for that purpose and closing. I'm going to do it again. Something that I posed in the last 24 hours based on an objection we submitted about people using that candidate for the entirety of their presentation. So let me say, either the chief candidate want to reference their opening statements on the electronic device, fine. As soon as your opening statement is finished, close that and set it aside. Don't set it here, set it away. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Santa Clara's Santa Clara Votes program. This is a project supported by the City Council and the Mayor, and funds are allocated each year for this project and have been so for the last decade or so. This evening, we will be hearing from candidates for Chief of Police, City Clerk, and for Council seat number 4. My name is Fred Keeley. I'm the City of Santa Cruz's, I live in the City of Santa Cruz, the City of Santa Clara's independent democracy consultant. And the reason I was mentioning to the audience, the reason they select somebody from outside the area is so that the function that I perform with regard to these candidates, forums, and questions, and accountability in terms of the city's code of campaign ethics, so there is someone doing that job who does not have a stake in the outcome of the City of Santa Clara. This evening we will hear from candidates for Chief of Police first, then the City Clerk's position, then Council seat number 4. The way this will work is the same way that it worked last week, and that is that candidates will make opening statements. They'll then respond to a couple of questions submitted online in advance of tonight, and they will then answer questions that are submitted during the forum this evening. And lastly, they will have a closing statement. All of those comments by the candidates will be 2 minutes in duration. Because we have time, when 2 minutes arrives, I'll ask candidates to be kind enough. They don't have to stop speaking. They can finish their sentence, although their thought, which might be much more expansive, we would ask them to not finish their entire thought, but simply finish their sentence. And I would encourage you, if you would like to submit questions in writing this evening. For those of you that are watching on television or watching this streamed live on the internet or on the city's YouTube site, I would let you know that you can submit questions for tomorrow night's forum for the remaining 3 council seats, and you can do that by going to scvotes@santaclaraca.gov. That's scvotes@santaclaraca.gov. Let's turn to our candidates for Chief of Police. This evening, we will hear from Mike Sellers and Pat Nicolai, who are seeking election to the position of City Police Chief in the City of Santa Clara. We will begin with opening statements in the order in which the 2 gentlemen appear on the ballot. So we will start with Mr. Sellers, 2-minute opening statement. Good evening, Mr. Sellers.
Good evening. My name is Mike Sellers, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I have been your police chief for the past 4 years and spent my entire 31-year career with the Santa Clara Police Department. I'm running for re-election for the next 4 years because I have the desire to build upon my accomplishments and continue to implement programs and initiatives currently underway. I am committed to leading this fine organization and maintaining our status as one of the safest cities in America. Crime rate in our town is approximately 27% down and is not by accident. And we have achieved this remarkable rating of 11th safest city in America. It's through hard work, dedication, and excellent police work of my staff and partnering with our residents and business leaders. The increase of social media and the implementation of programs like Chat with the Chief and outfitting my officers with body-worn cameras have built stronger relationships with our community. I increased the number of students in our Citizen Police Academy, and our volunteer program has grown. I have continued to important programs such as DARE, PAL, and have worked closely with our seniors. I believe this election is all about qualifications and experience. During my 31 years, I have held many special assignments and held every supervisory and management rank within our organization. I was responsible for providing a public safety plan for Levi Stadium and was the lead law enforcement officer for Super Bowl 50, which has been recognized as one of the safest Super Bowls. I manage a $64 million budget with a team of 230 employees and another 210 part-time per diem employees. My opponent is currently a sergeant and supervises one officer. He doesn't have management experience to lead this organization. In fact, he doesn't meet the requirements to apply for any chief job in this county. Out of all the elected positions, this year's police chief and city clerk position is the most important. If the wrong person is elected, it will be a devastating effect on the city and the citizens we serve. I am the only qualified candidate, so please re-elect me, Chief Mike Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. We will now hear an opening statement from Mr. Nicolai. 2 minutes, Mr. Nicolai. Good evening.
Thank you. My opponent likes to say that this election is all about his qualifications. I believe it is about leadership. Let's compare the difference. My opponent's qualifications have left us at the same staffing levels as 25 years ago. He has hired new officers, but only enough to maintain the status quo. My opponent's qualifications have let the 49ers dictate safety at Levi's Stadium, including the recent increase in Uber vehicles. Despite his qualifications, he's lost the support of 95% of the employees he supervises: the police officers, sergeants, lieutenants, dispatchers, CSOs, records personnel. Despite his qualifications, he's lost the support of the City Council. Mayor Gilmore, Council Members Watanabe, and Council Members Caserta have endorsed me. That's a majority of council members who have taken a position in this race. So a lot of key people, not just me, think that Chief Sellers' qualifications on paper does not equal real leadership. They care about the record. I intend to bring leadership to the position of police chief. Under my leadership, I will work collaboratively with the City Council to increase staffing. Using the current budget, I will create a robust hiring unit and give them the resources they need to ensure that we can hire the best employees. Under my leadership, we will dictate the safety of Levi Stadium. I will establish a permitting process to ensure that unsafe events can be stopped. And I will protect pedestrians by forcing Uber to work within our traffic plan, not sidestep it. Under my leadership, I will ensure that no general fund money is spent at the stadium. The audit has confirmed that general fund money was used in direct contradiction to what my opponent has said. I have a vested interest in this department and this city. I have worked here 25 years, and I have lived here 24 years. I live in the old quad, and I care deeply about this city, and I want to protect it. My name is Pat Nicolai. I am here for you, the residents of Santa Clara. I am the choice for public safety, and I ask for your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will begin with the questions that were submitted in advance, and we will start in terms of an answer to this question from Mr. Nicolai. Mr. Nicolai, here's the question. It's been said that the city of Santa Clara is the 11th safest city to live in. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. I'm told that the police department categorizes automobile burglaries as, quote, car clouts, close quote. This lowers the number of serious crimes. Is this true? Should this practice be changed or continued? Mr. Nicolai.
Yes, I think if you look at statistics alone, they can be misleading. You can take a statistic and make it appear however you want it to appear. You can look at a website that says we are the 11th safest city. Well, I can look at several other websites and see that we are not even the 11th safest city in California. Basically, the numbers do lie. You can make them say whatever you want them to say. Regarding auto burglaries, I don't know if they are properly encoded or properly reported on the UCR reports, but if they are misreported, then yes, they are lowering the crime in the city. But another important aspect is violent crime. If you look at violent crime, over this time last year, there has been a 60% increase. So I would not want to rest on the fact that we are the 11th safest city. I would look at ways to improve safety, especially in neighborhoods. Everyone knows a neighbor who has had their house broken into, had their car broken into, had a package stolen from their porch. It's obvious that the statistics are not telling the truth. We all know that crime happens in our city, and it appears that it is getting worse. That is why we need to increase staffing. If we increase staffing, we can be a proactive agency. We don't want to be a reactive agency. We want to go out there and find the criminals before they commit the crime. We need to increase our streets crime unit so they can go out there and do the enforcement that we need them to do. All of these things need to be done in order to protect the citizens. Because if the perception of the residents is that crime has gone up, then it doesn't matter what the numbers are. We need to take care of residents. We need to put neighborhoods first.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sellers, would you like me to repeat the question, sir?
Yes, please.
Please to do so. It's been said that Santa Clara is the 11th safest city to live in. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. I'm told that the police department categorizes automobile burglaries as, quote, car clouts, close quote. This lowers the real number of serious crime. Is this true, and should this practice be changed or continued?
If there is no suspects, and I'll answer the question, if there is no suspects attached and it's just strictly a car break-in, then it is considered a car clout. It's considered a misdemeanor, depending upon the value, a misdemeanor offense. However, those are captured, and it's consistent. We follow the guidelines for the Uniform Crime Report, which has been consistent throughout. In the last 2 years, we've been very consistent with all the crimes. So the numbers speak for themselves. Our crime rate has a reduction of 27% overall. Residential, I believe commercial burglaries are down like as much as 37%, and violent crimes are also down. I would disagree with my opponent that violent crimes are up by 67%. I would encourage people to go to our website or contact Department of Justice and look at the Uniform Crime Report statistics, and you'll get the accurate information as we've provided. Staffing, I would like to address that issue. Currently in patrol, we have 62 uniformed officers in patrol assigned. That's the highest amount we've had in years that is specifically assigned to patrol. We have enough staffing in patrol that is currently monitoring your streets. When I've been walking around the neighborhoods, the first thing I've been told by several neighbors is that they appreciate the quality of service we're providing and the feel of being safe in our society. There is no issue about, I shouldn't say that, there has been not much concern about the crime rate. The concerns I've been hearing about is the traffic conditions and what's been going on, and which we have to work on. But the actual crime rate overall, I've been told by our citizens, they'd be feeling very comfortable. But again, I would encourage you to look at the Uniform Crime Report and get the true facts before just coming up with your own solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question, Mr. Sellers, we will start with you. Last week, Santa Clara residents submitted several questions relating to the city 49er deal, and more have come in this week. Regardless of what the results are of the city-approved audit, it is clear that the police department does not know everything going on at Levi's Stadium. What would you do to get greater transparency of the 49ers' actions to pay fees, handle traffic, and other 49er-related problems? Mr. Sellers.
Well, I think people should start attending the ad hoc committee that's regarding the audit. Fortunately, I was notified of this one that was earlier this week, and I would really encourage you to attend the next one. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the first one because I was unaware of it, but my opponent showed up with KPIX. What we've been told is that the audit's taken a look at everything. They have interviewed department heads, and I would like to mention is that KPX reporter specifically asked the auditor, have you found any deliberate wrongdoings, talking about the department heads? And if the response from the auditor was, I have found no deliberate wrongdoings. He actually indicated that the problem is that the stadium authority and the city manager's office did not provide any directions, which caused some misunderstandings with some procedures. We work very closely with the 49ers, and if the audit finds that there's funds that have not been charged to them, I fully expect the 49ers to be responsible and pay for that, if that's what the stadium authority comes up with. But we work very, very close in partnership with the 49er and the stadium management company to protect the neighborhoods, have the right traffic control conditions out there, the right staffing levels. But I want to make sure that you completely understand the staffing levels out to the stadium are my responsibility, not the 49ers. If I want to increase staffing out at the stadium to make it a safe environment, that's exactly what I can do. If you notice around the world, and especially in this country, back east, New York, New Jersey, with the situations that they've had in those particular areas, we've had over 50 large-scale events at the stadium with virtually very little problems. And I'm extremely proud of my officers and what they've been able to do and what we've been able to accomplish, not only at the police department, but for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Mr. Nicolai, I'd be glad to repeat the question for you.
Thank you.
Regardless of what the results are of the city's approved audit, it is clear that the police department does not know everything going on at Levi's Stadium. What would you do to get greater transparency of the 49ers' actions, to pay fees, to handle traffic, and other 49er-related problems? Mr. Nicolai.
Excellent. Well, I think the key is transparency. We need to make sure that the residents know where their money is being spent. That's why I am so excited that this audit is being done, because we are going to be able to find out exactly what money was spent inappropriately at the stadium. And then we can get the general fund money back to where it belongs, to the residents of Santa Clara. Now, I think it's important that the audit is happening right now, and I'm sorry that my opponent didn't know about the first meeting. All I did was ask, and they told me when the first meeting was. So I attended, and I'm glad he was able to make it to the second one, and I'm sure he'll be at the future audit meetings. And I think the key is that the audit has shown that, yes, general fund money was used. Now, one of the big things we can do to change that is what the city is currently doing, is looking at hiring a stadium manager. I'm not sure exactly what the new term is going to be or the job title, but we need someone from the city who is looking over the contracts to make sure that they are fair and in the city's best interest. Unfortunately, we haven't had that. Now, at the police department level, we need to make sure that we are correctly tracking our time. Now, an easy way to do that is with our time cards. Now, the special events unit has on their time cards a specific line that says stadium-related operations. None of the other divisions have that. So when the city manager's directive came out recently saying that you need to properly track your time, that is something that would have been an easy fix for the department to make immediately, is simply update everyone's time cards so that they could put down if they were doing stadium-related activities. That simple change alone would make it a lot easier to track the money that's being spent.
Thank you, sir. We're now going to move to those questions that were submitted tonight. We've got a lot of them, so I'll get through as many as we can with the time permitting. We will begin this with Mr. Nicolai. Mr. Nicolai, please describe the training and experience you have in working with diverse communities, such as cultural competency, also sensitive handling of sexual assault and domestic violence incidents, and incidences involving mental health and crisis. What types of such training would you emphasize as chief of police?
Well, one of the early assignments I had at the police department was involving being an investigator for child abuse cases. So from an early part of my career, I dealt with probably the most helpless victims there are, children that are the victims of sexual and physical abuse. So I learned early how to deal with people in basically the worst situation possible. And I've continued that throughout my career. When you go through programs like being the DARE supervisor, you deal with schools which are, have a wide variety of people, both nationalities and learning levels with learning disabilities. So you learn quickly how to deal with all of those types of people. Now, I think what you really need to do is you need to make sure that your officers are trained to handle all those kinds of situations. When you look at a lot of the shootings that have been happening recently, a lot of times when they do the research later, there was mental health issues involved. So one of the key training points is a crisis intervention training. Then we have CIT officers. I would encourage more of our officers to get that training, because if you had that kind of training where you could deal with all different types of individuals, that would go a long way to helping to resolve a crisis situation without having to resort to a use of force. So I think that training would be valuable, which is one of the reasons I think we need to increase our training budget so that we can make sure that everyone that wants that training can get that training.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolai. Mr. Sellers, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Please do so. Please describe the training and experience you have in working with diverse communities, such as cultural competency training, sensitivity, handling sexual assault and domestic violence cases, and mental health crisis training. What types of training would you implement as Chief of Police? Mr. Sellers.
So my training is I've been a police officer for the past 31 years and have conducted several different investigations throughout my career. As chief, I have worked with several community members, community faith-based group members, and I think the relationships and building community partnerships is extremely important to understand the needs of the community. My opponent is correct that crisis intervention training is extremely important. Several situations my officers are being faced with deal with people with mental illness. At the county chief level, we are implementing several programs and doing cross-training. Several of my officers are currently CIT trained, and we're looking to get the entire department completely trained in CIT training to hopefully reduce inappropriate or unnecessary uses of force or deadly force in those type of situations dealing with mental illness. This coming January, or actually November, we are starting where the entire department is going to be in bias-based training. It's going to be a full 3-day training for all of our employees to be able to handle certain biases that they possess. For example, I like vanilla ice cream, other people like chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream. And the importance is that you know your biases, but you don't act on them. And the entire county is going to this particular type of training to hopefully have a better understanding of our individual biases. So our training budget itself this past year, we've increased it by 37%. We have $137,000 towards our training budget. It used to be, the low time a couple years ago, $100,000. Our officers are very well trained. By post standards, we only need to train 24 hours every 2 years. Our officers receive a minimum of about 30 to 40 hours per year. So they're very well trained, and we're going to continue to provide training for the officers.
Thank you, sir. We will begin this question with Mr. Sellers. Mr. Sellers, the word leadership has been used extensively by both candidates. Leadership is earned over time. How do you feel your leadership is perceived by your organization and by the city you serve? Mr. Sellers.
I think my actions speak for myself. I think you have to lead by example in an organization, and I think I've done exactly that. I think our community is extremely happy and respect our law enforcement and what our officers do day in and day out, and I think that's extremely important. You know, as chief, you're faced with a lot of ethical and tough decisions to make, and sometimes individuals of the department may not appreciate it, but I think it's extremely important that you have to hold everybody accountable, especially the chief of police position. You got to do that, and sometimes it's not a popular decision, but I think each time you make these tough decisions, you have to look in the mirror and make sure that you're making those right decisions. So I think it's very, very important that we hold all of our employees and to core values and make sure that they do the best job they can do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nicolai, would you like me to repeat it?
Sure.
Please do so, sir. The word leadership has been used extensively by both candidates. Leadership is earned over time. How do you feel your leadership is perceived by your organization and by the city you serve?
Thank you. I really believe that being a leader is more than having rank. It's having the willingness to make a difference. And I believe that I have been a leader throughout my tenure at the department. A very specific example is my leadership of the Police Officers Association. I was elected for 14 years as the POA president. And I was elected because the membership saw that I put their interests first. I wasn't doing it selfishly. I wasn't trying to, pad my own pocketbook. I was doing what was in the best interest of the membership. So I think you lead by example. And I think when there is a failure of leadership, it shows in several ways. For example, if the people you supervise are not supporting you and not endorsing you, it should be a red flag that there is a problem with your leadership. If there are problems at the department, for example, if you have officers that are arrested, then you should look for ways to change things to make sure that that doesn't happen again. You shouldn't say, no, we shouldn't make any changes. If there's officers arrested, yes, you need to make changes to make sure that that doesn't happen again. You should always be looking to improve things. If someone asks you if there's anything wrong with the department, if your answer is no, there is nothing wrong with the department, then you are not being a leader. You are sitting back saying that I am fine with the status quo and I don't need to improve things. So for being a leader, I think you need to have a vision, you need to have the department move forward, and you need to give them direction. So make sure that they know where you want to go so that they can get the department there.
Thank you, sir. We will move to another question submitted this evening. And on this, Mr. Nicolai, we will begin with you. Mr. Nicolai, and I'm going to set this up by a couple of predicate sentences so that the question then works a little better, perhaps. In California, whether it's a charter city or general law city, the city manager essentially assembles the budget and proposes it to the city council. City council and the mayor adopt the budget. City manager largely is at the top of the pyramid in terms of managing the budget during the fiscal year. Here comes the question. What role should the police chief take in this city, because the police chief is elected, in assembling and managing the police department's annual budget?
Okay, so you look at the budget, and as my opponent has said, it's a $64 million budget. Well, let's look at the budget. $55.5 million of that budget is for salaries and benefits of the employees. So I just took care of 85% of the budget. Thank you. Now, when you look at the rest of the budget, there are a lot of checks and balances in that budget, so that there is a system in place to ensure that the funds are spent properly. If an expenditure is over $5,000, it needs city manager approval. If it's over $15,000, then you have to get multiple bids. And if it's over $50,000, then the city council has to get an approval. So I think what the police chief should be doing is providing guidance for the budget. Because if you don't know it, the actual captains are the ones that draft the budget itself. And it's a program-based budget. And actually it's a kind of a hybrid budget, because it's a program-based budget that also has line items under each program. But what I think the chief needs to do is needs to provide guidance on how the money is spent. Specifically, I think that the chief needs to put more money towards recruiting. Okay? We need to have a robust recruiting team, because we do need to get our staffing up. But you can't do it when you only have one person assigned full-time and one person assigned part-time. You need to give them the resources possible to make that happen. When you look at our SWAT team, our SRT team, we need to increase their budget. Their budget has been flat for years. Okay, that is one of the most high-risk assignments. They should have more resources, which would include more training. Our training budget, yes, it went up a little bit, but it is still not at the levels it used to be. And again, when you have a case where there was a lawsuit and you had a $500,000 payout, well, I don't know all the facts, but I can guarantee you that if there was more training, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sellers, would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
And I won't get this verbatim because I made up the first two component parts of this, but generally speaking, in California, whether you're a general law city or a charter city, the city manager proposes a budget to the council and the mayor. A way to think about it is that the city manager proposes and the city council and the mayor dispose of the budget by adopting it at some point. You have an elected chief of police here in the city of Santa Clara. What role do you think the elected chief of police should take in assembling and managing the police department's annual budget?
I think you have to take full responsibility for the budget. You have to be actively involved, and you have to make sure that your captains and subordinates are following the budget principles and making sure that they are being fiscally responsible. It's very important, we're correct, with $64 million budget, approximately about 88% of it is benefits and salary, and the rest is contractual services, overtime, as needed budget, and so on. But I think you saw it this last, with the staffing study. I went and hired a staffing study to come out and to take a look at our best practices to see how we can save money within the organization and streamline different processes. They have decided that we need a new CAD and RMS system, which is a $3 million budget, or $3 million project, which I'm going to be ultimately responsible for managing that project. But I think it's also very important to be a partner within the city. You have to fight for your own budget and what's important, and we've increased the training budget, but you have to also look at other departments, that the needs of the other departments. We hear the community talking about infrastructure throughout the city. So I think as a department head, we need to work with the other departments to be able to make sure that we work in partnership to be able to provide the best service throughout the community. But I think what's very important is ultimately I have to be responsible for managing this very complex and difficult budget, and to make sure that we provide the best services and get the best money or bang for the money that our citizens pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On this question, Mr. Sellers, we will begin with you. This is a one-sentence question, but my guess is it might have more than one-sentence answer. Mr. Sellers, do you support binding arbitration for public safety employees? If so, why? If not, why not?
I do not support binding arbitration, and the reason for that is because I think it takes the control out of the local government. I do not want a outside arbitrator to dictate or take away any of my management rights as a manager and or overrule or think what's best for our city. So I am definitely against binding arbitration, and I would not support that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nicolai, would you like me to repeat the question?
Oh, no, I think I know it.
Okay, there we go. Mr. Nicolai.
Yes, and I do support binding arbitration. When I was the POA president, we actually worked to get it on the ballot, and I worked closely with the fire department to get binding arbitration on the ballot for city council. And actually the city council agreed with us because the city council placed it on the ballot for us, as opposed to us having to gather signatures for it. So we had the support of the city council at the time, and again, the Police Officers Association and the Firefighters Association supported it. Unfortunately, the voters of Santa Clara said no, and they turned it down. Well, I was fine with that, because really that's the deciding person in this, is the voters of the city. And if the voters of the city decide on something, well, that's what I'm going to accept, and I'm not going to argue with them. Okay? But the bottom line is I did support binding arbitration for the basic reason that public safety officers are prohibited from striking. And I don't know any police officer or firefighter who would ever go on strike. but any other bargaining unit could if the situation got so bad. Luckily, in this city, it has never gotten that bad. And we've had a very good relationship working with the association and management in order to get everything resolved, and we never had to go that way. So, yes, I did support it, and I do think it's a good idea for public safety.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, we have arrived at closing statements. And we will go in reverse ballot order. Mr. Nicolai, 2 minutes for your closing statement, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you taking the time to either be here in person or to watch this on TV. I believe that an educated voter is a powerful person, and I believe that an educated voter will support me in November. I have been at the Santa Clara Police Department for 25 years, and I've been a leader the entire time. You do not need a special rank or position of authority to be a leader. You need a desire to make things better, and you need a willingness to take action. I am running for police chief to make things better. I will do what the Santa Clara police chief should be doing, putting the safety of Santa Clara residents first. I will work collaboratively with the residents to make sure that their issues with the stadium are addressed, such as parking, traffic, noise. I will stop general fund money from being used at the stadium. Santa Clara tax dollars should be spent on Santa Clara residents. I will have the 49ers pay more for public safety so that Santa Clara revenues and on-duty resources are not used in violation of Measure J. I will work to create a permitting process to prevent unsafe events from coming to the stadium. I will also work with the Santa Clara University administrators to hold students accountable for their off-campus behavior. I will increase staffing so that neighborhoods are better protected. I will put Santa Clara residents' safety first. I will put neighborhoods first. Again, my name is Pat Nicolai. I want to be the Santa Clara Police Chief. I want to be your police chief. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sellers, your closing statement.
Sure. I would also like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I believe one thing I wanted to address is that there's been some considerable amount of misinformation that my opponent has been providing to our community about the stadium audit. And I think this is a good opportunity for me to make the record straight. The facts are, I am fully supportive of the audit. I have encouraged employees to work with the auditors. We have a policy that requires that any employee of our organization knows of any wrongdoing, they are to notify their supervisor. Nobody has done that. Last meeting, during the ad hoc committee meeting, the KPX reporter, like I mentioned earlier, asked the auditor, have you found any deliberate wrongdoings? He replied, no. And he followed up with, the auditor indicated that it seems to be that a little unclear of the procedures because of the stadium authority, and the city manager has not provided any guidance until recently. So my question is there a smoking gun? I don't think so. The question I have is really to do with, what do we want for a police department? Do we really want a police union to run the police department? Do we really want somebody that supports binding arbitration, which I don't, or a chief that could not apply for any position in the county because he does not meet the minimum requirements or qualifications? He has no management experience, no budgetary experience, no policy-making experience, no experience in managing large and critical operations, no experience supervising more than 10 people, no experience writing or presenting agenda reports. I hope instead you want someone who has dedicated his entire life to the city of Santa Clara and has a track record of proven leadership with 12 years of management experience, 4 years the last being your police chief. I supervise approximately 230 employees, an additional 210 as-needed employees at the stadium. I manage a $64 million budget and implemented programs to build transparency and trust in our community. I have done all this and much more while keeping our community safe, with the crime rate down 27% and the 11th safest city. So I want your trust. I hope that I have your trust, and I hope I have your support, and I want to continue to be your police chief. So vote for Mike Sellers. Thank you.
Mr. Sellers, Mr. Nicolai, thank you both for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, please do thank both of these gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we will do is take about a 5-minute break here. We will then set up during that 5 minutes for the city clerk candidates. If you have questions for the city clerk or for council seat number 4, feel free to submit them. Thank you.
How you doing, Debbie?
Ladies and gentlemen, at least 5 minutes has elapsed, so I would ask you to take your seats again and ask the candidates for City Council to take their seats, and we will begin in a minute or so. Welcome back. We are at the Santa Clara Votes Candidate Forum for 3 offices in the city of Santa Clara: Chief of Police, City Clerk, and Council seat number 4. We have just finished with the candidates for Chief of Police. We will now hear from the candidates for City Clerk, of which there are 2, Mr. Rod Diridon and Ms. Deborah Bress. We will hear from them in the order in which they appear on the ballot with regard to opening statements of 2 minutes each. Mr. Diridon, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Keeley. My name is Rod Diridon. I am your city clerk and your partner in democracy. You heard a lot about us and our personal backgrounds and beliefs in the last forum, but I've been asked many times in the interim what exactly the city clerk does, and that some folks either don't have the information or are confused by the rhetoric currently in the body politic. So let me share with you a highlight. The city clerk's office is a full-time department head managing a team of 10 and a $1.7 million annual budget. It's the first point of contact for most who call City Hall. We keep and retain the minutes in the official public record. We compose and post city council meeting agendas, serve as the city's elections official, implement transparency and open government programs, manage voter and community engagement programs, and ensure that the public has access to the public record, and many, many, many more roles. I also serve as the appointed city auditor. It's important to note that those are 2 separate roles, and this contest is for city clerk. The city auditor is a role which, as Ms. Baccinoni, the former city clerk and auditor, can attest, is one that is normally earned after years of hard work and not immediately given to somebody when they are elected city clerk. I should also note that the city auditor's office has seen great success in the past few years. We have a dozen process improvements, have saved the city about $15,000, but more importantly, have freed up more than 300 estimated staff hours. So we have done exceptional work, even though this current contest is not about that office. This current contest is also not about the Stadium Authority auditor, and that the Stadium Authority auditor is a separate person in a separate department with a separate function. I should point out that my opponent's consistent links between the 2 are factually incorrect and misleading. And with that, I'll remind you that I remain Rod Diridon, your 3-time international award-winning city clerk and your partner in democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Bress, your 2-minute opening remarks.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Bress. Is it working? Okay, it's working. And I am running for city clerk.
Let's just take a pause. Are we sure that that button is on which puts on a green light on there? Okay, you might want to just pull that a little bit closer. Thank you. And I won't take that off your time. Let me reset. There you go. 2 minutes.
My name is Deborah Bress, and I'm running for city clerk. I'm not going to tell you about a plethora of awards because I think they cost a lot of money and don't serve you, the public, any real good. So you've heard a lot of boasting and bragging, and I don't think that does the public any good either. And I think if someone has to sit up here and tell you what they do, it hasn't done you any good. I want to show you what I can do. I think the most important thing about what a city clerk should do is to serve the public. It isn't about awards. It isn't about degrees. In fact, the last time the current city clerk talked about his master's degree, that's great, except he didn't tell you he got that on the city's time and on this taxpayer's dime. That's great. I wouldn't do that. I don't think that's something you should pay for. My time is your time, and I need to be respectful of that. What this is all about is serving the city residents. When you can see my 460, which is the forms that we all have to submit, the deadline for doing that was today, I've taken and spent very, very little money. My opponent raised more than $30,000 and didn't even have an opponent. You see that? He took it from lobbyists, 2, one of which is someone who's just been declared a lobbyist, wrote that person a letter, and never followed up on it. He's taken it from people like Apple, and I guess that's how they get on the agenda. So all this trust and ethics and morality offers a whole lot of questions. So he's been there since 2004. Things are changing. It's time we do a lot of changing. It's time we change who's in the city's clerk's office, and I'd like your vote. It's time that we have a change start in the city clerk so that you finally have a voice in City Hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bress. Ms. Bress, to stay on the topic of the lobbyist ordinance, there are 3 types of lobbyists outlined in the lobbyist registration ordinance. What are those 3 types, and what is the role of the city clerk's office in implementing the overall lobbyist registration ordinance policy?
To be honest with you, I don't know them off the top of my head. I could easily open my notebook and look at them, but I haven't had the exposure to that law. All I know is when that originally came up in front of the city council, the current clerk fought having a lobbyist ordinance. He didn't want to have it. His office was given more funding to do that, finally, and then hasn't done it as well as he should have. The situation that it was tested on recently has been determined that he didn't follow through with that and find that person had registered as they should have. I don't know the 3 different flavors of lobbyists, but that would be something very easy to follow up on, and I would follow through on things, not just have someone write a letter and then just drop it completely. That's not doing your job. And when it comes to doing auditing, I would like to see what auditing he has done. Signing off on a check register once a week is not what I call auditing, and it's not what anybody with any kind of financial or accounting background would ever call auditing either. So auditing isn't a word, it's an action. So maybe I'd have to put in a CPRA request, which I do know what those are. It's a California Public Records action, to ask what auditing reports we could get out of the city clerk's office, because finding those online is impossible. I guess I could say I have been able to accomplish something. Right after I put out my first piece of collateral, I found that there was an RFP that was finally let go to ask for a new agenda system and ask for a storage system for documents. So at least being a candidate and putting out some information saying how poor our system is has motivated and kind of jump-started to get that improved. So my running for this office has got some action going out of the clerk's office, thank goodness, to finally get some enhancements we waited for so long. So I'm very pleased to say we are moving in the right direction just by pointing out some inefficiencies that have been there a long time.
Thank you, Ms. Bress. Mr. Diridon, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I've got the question. And there were so many statements made that were incorrect that I'm not going to be able to address all of them. They were actually factually incorrect, so I'm going to simply focus on the question. With regards to the lobbyist ordinance, there are contract lobbyists, business lobbyists, and expenditure lobbyists. And I'll remind folks that I proposed the first anti-revolving door lobbyist policy back in the mid and late 1990s, so I'm very, very solid on the policy area. In fact, This lobbyist ordinance itself is very successful. Just in the first quarter, since June, we've registered 70 lobbyists and organizations, just in the first quarter. And there's a separation of powers in the ordinance, where the city clerk's office handles compliance, the city attorney's office handles enforcement, and the city council owns the policy, which they do all the policies in the city. The city clerk's office sent the compliance letter to the individual in question back in June. At that point, we didn't drop it like my opponent has said. We confirmed that the city attorney's office was actively looking into their role, which is the enforcement and the interpretation of the policy, which is a legal function, not a compliance function. And it is important to respect that difference between the separation of powers. Similar to the way the police and the courts are different, in this case we have a separation of powers between the compliance element and the enforcement element. And that's important. In fact, the report that came out said, with regards to the work that my office would have done, that the city has been actively engaged since their adoption in developing guidelines and procedures for their implementation and enforcement. The calendars are published on a regular basis, and a number of persons and entities have registered as lobbyists. All of the information is readily available online on the city's website. But here's where it smells funny. We did our first quarter review and identified 10 other potential lobbyists. We did at the beginning of this month because that's what you do after the first quarter for a brand new program. Ms. Bress singled out one single person, only after that person was a candidate for city council. So either Ms. Bress was politically motivated, which is inappropriate as a city clerk candidate, or she was not competent enough to identify the other 10 potential lobbyists, or both, all of which is inappropriate for either the content and intent of a city clerk or the patency and intellect and competence required to do the duties.
Thank you. We'll move to our next question, and we will begin with Mr. Diridon and then Ms. Brest. Mr. Diridon, the city clerk has several functions. One of those is to be the city's chief elections officer. How would you assure that the sacred right to vote is protected?
Well, there are a number of ways to address that. The first, of course, is from the individual voter's point of view, and the next is from the candidate's point of view. From the voter's point of view, we want to make sure that folks aren't just afforded the opportunity to vote and allowed the opportunity to register to vote in multiple formats, which we've done very effectively. In fact, we've had partnerships with multiple different institutions, civil service organizations, schools, high schools, of course our city's very exceptional programs, and good partnerships with the registrar of voters to make sure that we have, for example, a VBM, vote by mail or absentee voter drop-off box hosted at the city clerk's office. We take that very, very seriously. Additionally, we make sure that there are adequate polling places in the right locations in the city of Santa Clara so that people can get to those, and that people know the rules with regards to voting by mail. And so that you know, in this election cycle, your ballot can be put in the mail, and it will be counted as valid with a postmark. In the past, it had to be received by the close of the polls. In this day, you can actually put it in the post office or in the post the day of the election. And that's very important. All those are important with regards to engaging the public in a manner that's patent. Of course, you are here in the Santa Clara Votes program. The reason you are here is one of the programs that my office had championed over the years. Of course, in this case, I've deferred involvement as a candidate that would be inappropriate. Mr. Keeley and Jennifer Yamaguma from the city manager's office are the leads on the program, and we have a firewall between us with regards to any direction. And finally, with regards to candidates, I'll say that I spent a significant amount of time explaining the nomination process, allowing people to be successful, and doing that in a manner that was complete and patent. And I hope that every candidate here, at least who worked with me through the process, would think that they were treated in a fair and unbiased manner. If that wasn't the case, please let me know, because I'd like to improve the program. I work for you, and I work for the public, and I enjoy being your partner in democracy.
Thank you. Ms. Bress, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure, please.
The city clerk has several functions. One of those is to be the city's chief elections officer. How would you assure that the sacred right to vote is protected?
That's a really good question, and one I would take seriously and actually do properly. We've had a few challenges with the current city clerk. For example, we are a charter city, and when there were some issues that came up about our city charter and making some amendments, he actually provided incorrect information about how that could be changed and actually provided wrong information about when that could be changed. So I wouldn't make those same errors. He talks about having a firewall between himself and some other people. That firewall has kind of become ashes in light of the fact that he retained yourself 2 years ago without a contract before the last election was even over, and I found out that the two of you enjoyed dinner together last week Wednesday after this session. So that's not much of a firewall, that's more like friends, which that's nice that you're friends together. I was also surprised that you had run for council here in Santa Clara, which I think should have been disclosed also. So that firewall is a little on the weak side, and I think all of that should have been disclosed more openly than it has been, too. We talk about protecting the right to vote. A lot of what he's taking credit for really has nothing to do with him whatsoever. It's through the county registrar of voters that a lot of these things happen. The county registrar of voters is responsible for the polling places, not the city clerk. The envelopes that come in the mail, those also come from the county registrar of voters. You can talk to the county registrar of voters, and many of those people there will kind of roll their eyes and mention that many times the information that we get from the city clerk here in Santa Clara isn't as complete as perhaps they would get from the registrar of voters. So, like I said before, it's time for someone to get information from a more clear and concise manner out of our city clerk, and I would make sure that information would be complete and correct.
Thank you. Ms. Bress, we will begin this question with you. What is the role of the city clerk in managing the stadium agreement and ensuring Measure J compliance?
Well, I know what it would be on my watch. I don't know exactly what or if anything is being done by the current city clerk. Again, if it is done, I've never been able to see any evidence of it. It's one of the most important agreements that this city has ever entered into. There's a lot of expenditures that are coming off of that, and there should be a constant review of what is being charged against the city, what is being paid by the city, what shouldn't be paid by the city, and what expenditures are coming out of what particular pockets. There is Measure J, which is in place, that was dictating that nothing should be coming out of the general fund whatsoever. It needs to be upheld. There was a grand jury investigation. My understanding, there may be another grand jury investigation. I also understand that the district attorney for the county of Santa Clara is looking into possibly starting an investigation too for some other bad doings that were going on. It was also disclosed recently at an ad hoc meeting that some of the expenditures that came across were signed off by the former city manager in the role of stadium executive director, that no one on the council was aware of those expenditures happening. So I'm hoping that the auditor is going to bring forth a lot of what was being spent and what was being spent on. So there's a lot of things that are being spent or that were spent that needs to look at. So I would be auditing things very carefully. Like, as I said, doing forensic accounting is very important to me and something that I hold near and dear, and doing project management is something else that I do very carefully and cautiously, and I would want to make sure that this money is spent as if it's my own money, and I wouldn't be off taking classes or be home changing diapers. I would make sure I would be in the office for specific and notable hours and not be MIA. I would be there and you'd know when I would be there.
Thank you. Mr. Diridon, what is the role of the city clerk in managing the stadium agreement and ensuring Measure J compliance?
Mr. Keeley, before I answer that, it occurs to me that Ms. Bress has brought up something which relates to the role that you play with regards to candidate interface, which was the topic of our discussion after last week's forum. Is that something that you feel comfortable explaining to the public so that they it doesn't appear that there was impropriety? Or would you like me to do so as part of my response to one of these questions?
You have a minute and 36 seconds left.
Thank Thank you very much, Mr. Keeley. With regards to the city clerk's role and Measure J compliance, those are separate entities. The stadium authority is separate from the city clerk's office. So the city clerk does not have a technical role with regards to Measure J compliance. However, I am very open to whatever the external auditors come up with and any role that we can play to make sure that Measure J is complied with, so long as it is within the role of the city clerk's office and compatible with the city charter. The first thing that we do is honor the city charter. And with that, we look forward to what they come up with. And if they come up with any role where we currently do not have one, I would love to be able to do so and to be able to be a partner with them. I will say that we did play a very large role with regards to Measure J itself and making sure that that election process happened in a manner that was fair and unbiased, and we did so in a manner that was effective. However, I will also call on my opponent to be clear and to have transparency herself. She hasn't yet told us who her employers are. She's talked a lot about the fact that she has a job and that she's a program manager, but she has yet to tell us who they are, what she does, so that we can vet that and see whether or not it's relevant. We also don't know who's paying her bills. Every other candidate running for city council has let the public know who pays her bills or who pays their bills. Ms. Bress hasn't done so. At the very least, as a city clerk, you ought to set the example by being open and transparent about who pays your bills.
Thank you. We'll begin this question, and this is our last question. Following your answers, we will go to closing statements. Mr. Diridon, virtually no other city in the state of California elects their city clerk. Why should the city of Santa Clara elect their city clerk?
First, I'll correct the question. In fact, in data run by California Common Cause that I heard last week, 25% of the cities in the state of California elect their city clerk. So it is not uncommon. The elected role of the city clerk is one where the public realizes that the keeper of the minutes and the keeper of the public record and the person running the city's elections should do so free of bias from either the city council or the city manager. Realize that were somebody not an elected city clerk, they would have to be appointed by somebody. So they would be appointed by the city council in one case, and if they're appointed by the city council, it's going to be very difficult for them to say no to a council member when they want something with regards to an election, with regards to their view of the public record, or with regards to their individual nuanced desires. Additionally, were they appointed by the city manager, it would be very difficult for the city council or for the city clerk to say no to the city manager with regards to accurately reflecting the direction of the city council and the authority presented to the city manager. There have been times during the course that I have been a city clerk that I have had to say no to city council members, and that I have had to say no to city managers and their staff people. And every time I've done it with the lens that I don't work for the city manager and I don't work for the city council. I work for the people of the city of Santa Clara. It is our government. It's your government. When you elect somebody, when you set up a city charter the way we have, you delegate that very precious portion of your sovereignty to a city clerk to act on your best interests every time, all the time, as often as they can, and as well as they can. And I've really enjoyed doing that as a self-described democracy geek, and I look forward to continuing to do so. There was very little that was more validating to me than the Santa Clara Weekly terming me as the city's chief democracy officer. It's a title that I will wear with pride and try and meet every day. Thank you.
Ms. Bress, virtually no other city in the state of California elects their city clerk. Why should folks in the city of Santa Clara elect their city clerk?
I have to agree that that is actually an incorrect statement. We're the only city that elects our chief of police, but not our city clerk. Our city clerk should be nonpartisan and independent of all outside influences. I have remained that. I have not taken any endorsements or asked for any endorsements. My opposition just received an endorsement from the Democratic Party. I didn't even answer that. There are many questions on that that actually have nothing to do or not within the purview of the city clerk's office. Answering those questions would have been a misrepresentation of facts, and I don't believe in lying to somebody. The city clerk also asked for the endorsement of the police and the fire associations. Actually asked for and received them before candidates were even, it was even closed to get candidates. I find that very unethical to begin with. So he was awarded those out of school, I would call that. And again, why would somebody ask for an endorsement? To me, those all come with strings attached. I have not gotten any of those. Every contribution I've gotten is from people in Santa Clara or businesses in Santa Clara. That cannot be said. So it needs to be a non-partisan, unbiased position. And we need to bring that back. I don't know what Cindy Chavez, other than getting on the agenda before anybody else, is going to get out of her $550 she contributed to Mr. Deardon. It doesn't make sense to me why you go to people who live in Sparks, Nevada to give you money. Follow the money. When you look at some of the people that are giving money and you see them say, you know, this is how, let me run your business, let me get the right people here so that you can run your business because you deserve the time to run your business. That sounds kind of Hitlerish to me, and I don't think those are the type of people we want to have running our city. So follow the money when you see who's giving people money to get them elected. I don't think those are the type of people we want running our city.
Thank you, Ms. Bress. Ladies and gentlemen, would you thank the candidates for being here this evening? I'm sorry. They sounded so much like closing statements, I apologize. But thank you for thanking them. We'll now go to closing statements. Ms. Bress, your closing statement.
I thank you all for coming again this evening. It's kind of hard having these back-to-back in weeks. You're probably getting as tired of this as I'm getting tired of it, too, in a way. Although I do find it kind of stimulating to have the chance to talk to you and give you some straight scoop and just give you real homegrown talk about what I believe in and where I come from and what I want to do for our city. I have seen our citizens come together in a crisis. I know when we had our earthquake here, I was so impressed with how our neighbors all came together. I had a gas range and we cooked a lot of food so it didn't spoil. My neighbor had a generator and we put stuff in the freezer so it didn't go to waste. I want us as citizens to come together, but let's come together without the crisis, unless you consider what we're going through a crisis. I know what the city clerk does. I know what a city clerk can do better, and I want to be that person to bring us together. Right now, too many people don't know what the city clerk does. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to be a good city clerk. It doesn't take somebody that's supported by big businesses, by special interests. They don't belong in the city clerk's office. They don't belong in your government. They don't belong running your city. This is your city. I want to represent you. It's time you kick that to the curb. You don't need people telling you and that run your things that say things like, we take care of politics so you can take care of business. One of your basic rights is to have the freedom to run your business without unwarranted government interference. That's what one PAC says when they give money. I think that's awful. So please, elect me as your city clerk. I won't do that. I want to partner with you. You have a right to know what's going on in your city. You don't now. You've had to ask, what the heck does a city clerk do? You shouldn't have to ask. You should have the chance to know, and I want to do that with you and for you. Thank you very much. Elect Deborah Bress for your next city clerk.
Thank you, Ms. Bress. Mr. Deardon, your closing statement.
It appears that Ms. Bress also doesn't know what the city clerk does based on her comments. That said, I'm going to close talking about the temperament necessary to be a city clerk. And it has to do with the code of ethics of the profession. To be ever mindful of my neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and to extend the same treatment I wish to receive myself. The city clerk keeps the record and cannot generally take policy decisions. It's the ombudsman, it needs to be welcoming to the community, and is the agenda compiler, so it needs to be even-handed. In just the past year, my opponent has spoken more than 100 times on policy issues on front of our city council. That is incredibly inappropriate. and biased for the what should be an unbiased nature of the job and the person recording the public record. Just since July, she has addressed the city council and staff, calling them crybabies, dumb as rocks, using words like suck, damn, and pissing match. Just tonight, she related me to Hitler. That lacks the tact, decorum, and welcoming and opening that is necessary to allow people in the public forum and in the city clerk's office to feel welcome and taken care of. And finally, Ms. Bress has been, in just the last council meeting, said that all but one city council member should be able to place something on the agenda. If the city clerk compiles the agenda, how is that one city council member supposed to feel like they're treated fairly? She's blatantly unfair. And I will ask her to disclose her financial statements, who employs her, her contact information, which she still has not provided for the public with regards to her address and her telephone number. And we'll ask her to, if she does have ideas, to stop speaking in platitudes, because she likes to talk about what she would do better without giving you any specifics. I've told you what I'll do. I've told you what I've done, and I'll continue to operate as your partner in democracy every day, working hard to make Santa Clara and keep Santa Clara the award-winning place that it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you now, again, thank these candidates? Thank you both very much. I'm going to reserve the right when the candidates step down for a second. Let me ask you, thank you very much. We'll thank and excuse you. Before we take our 5-minute break, thank you both very much. Insofar as an issue was raised during the candidates' debate for city clerk about my role, let me say a couple of things. One is, I don't think it matters whether you are Megyn Kelly, Candy Crowley, or Lester Holt. The moderators of these events ought not to ever be the issue. They are from time to time. Let me briefly say this. I grew up in West San Jose, and when I was going to De Anza College in San Jose State, I had the privilege of living here in the city of Santa Clara. I'm 66 years old now, and when I was in my early 20s, I had the privilege of living in this fine city. I did run for city council when I was 22 years old as an act of democracy, and I learned a lot. I moved to the city of Santa Cruz in 1976, and in 1988 ran successfully and served for 2 terms on the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors. I was also elected to 3 terms as the elected county treasurer in the county of Santa Cruz, and then served all the terms you can serve under term limits in the California State Assembly, representing the Central Coast of California, and serving as Speaker Pro Tem under 4 separate speakers. I would like to speak to the issue of how I come to sit here. After many years of this program being in effect, and during the last election cycle, I was asked if I would conduct an evaluation of the program. And I said that it would be helpful if I could start right away. And without the benefit of a contract, I began working as the city was processing my personal services contract. I performed those services, provided an evaluation of the program over the 2 years that I was asked to review. Following that, the city of Santa Clara issued a request for proposal for the position of democracy consultant. I put together a proposal. The proposals were looked at, and I was selected to serve in this role. So I want to be clear that it was in response to a request for a proposal process. The last thing I want to raise is that Ms. Bress mentioned that I had dinner with Mr. Diridon after the last forum. That's absolutely correct. And it was because Mr. Diridon asked if what I would do is what I've done with many candidates, and some of those candidates are in the room, some of them were in the room earlier, and some will be in the room tomorrow. One of the functions that I perform as the democracy consultant for the city of Santa Clara is to respond to telephone inquiries, email inquiries, and personal inquiries, asking if I would provide some help and assistance to a candidate in understanding the effects of the campaign code of ethics and its implementation. Somebody may call me up or send me an email and say, gee, I'm thinking this, or looking at that, or my opponent this or that. What do you think about this? Can we talk about this? Absolutely, they can talk about that, because I believe that you want to resolve problems at the lowest level you possibly can, and typically a conversation face-to-face will help do that. And I was asked by Mr. Diridon if he could do that. I was on my way to have dinner at Denny's down the street and asked him to join me. Following that dinner, then I sat down actually with a number of candidates that are here this evening who were all having dinner and having a good time. We spent another hour and a half or so together. So I wanted to explain that so that there is no misunderstanding of any kind. And we will now take our 5-minute break. We'll return in 5 minutes and hear from City Council candidates. Thank you.
I may need my glasses.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Santa Clara Votes Candidates Forum. This is an issues forum, and this group features the candidates for council seat number 4 in the November 8th City Council election here in the city of Santa Clara. We have 4 candidates: Marcos Bracamonte, Raj Chahal, Pat Mahan, and Tino Silva. We will be hearing from them in terms of their opening remarks in the order in which they appear on the ballot. So you in the audience, the way they appear on the ballot is from your left to your right. We will begin 2-minute opening statements with Mr. Silva. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's late, and you've probably been to 100 debates as we have. But here we are again. My name is Tino Silva, and I'm running for Santa Clara City Council Seat 4. I'm very proud to announce recently that I received the endorsement of the Santa Clara Fire Association and have the sole endorsement of the Santa Clara Police Officers Association. I hope in this debate tonight we can talk about what concerns many Santa Clarans. Specifically, I'd like to talk about a few measures that you'll have the opportunity to vote on in November. First, let's talk campaign term limits. You have an opportunity this election period to finally put a stop to career politicians running Santa Clara. And I believe my opponent also agrees with the ethics of term limits when she said in 1994, and I quote, "The people of California demanded change when they imposed a 2-term limit on their politicians, and that the Santa Clara City Council should not place itself above the will of the people by allowing a politician to serve conceivably 24 years or more." Second, you have an opportunity to take back the power from large corporations who tried to steal our open space and parklands. I fought hard in the Charter Review Committee to get Measure R on the ballot. By approving this measure, you're ensuring that you, the citizens, are the gatekeepers of our precious parkland and open space. I understand our parks are in dismal condition, which is why I demanded 100% park recovery fees from developers. And although Santa Clara did not impose park recovery fees for over 30 years, my opponent insisted while on the council in 2014 that developers only be assessed 65% of those fees because she did not want to negatively impact those same developers who are making millions of dollars, and she also didn't want to slow down the economic development. By the looks of things, and by the looks of the projects that are in the pipeline, I don't think the park recovery fees have slowed down development one bit. It's time to change Santa Clara. The Santa Clara way has lost its way a long time ago. The challenges we face today are a direct result of old world Santa Clara way of doing business, and we need a new way of governing. We need a new perspective, new opinions, and factor in the concerns of citizens before big business. We need to take our city back, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Mr. Chahal, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you very much for being here. Dear Santa Clarans, I'm Raj Chahal, resident of Santa Clara for last 21 years. Hope you all know my tagline for this election is Raj for Residents. There's a reason for this. For many years, me and so many of you have observed that our council is not truly representing the residents of the city. Rather, there is an impression among majority of residents that the developers' interest and the special interests are being preferred over interest of the community. Check my track record. Whether it's my involvement with the city's non-profits or planning commission, I have stood along with you all. I have always fought for your rights. I have always listened to you and very passionately stood up for you. I promise you, I will bring back the resident voice on the council. As a planning commissioner, I have fought for residents against inappropriate high-density housing. A recent example is the Moonlight Bowling Alley. I voted against it. I have stood up to protect our neighborhoods. Let me tell you some of my top priorities to work on. Our council is currently lacking in policy matters. We have not reviewed our general plan, and we have come up with arbitrary decisions on several high-density developments. There is no policy on affordable housing. There is no policy on TDM penalties. Don't we know we have big-time traffic issues of our residents in the city? Our seniors are so scared to get on the crowded roads. My goal is to engage and involve our community in decision-making process. I'll make sure that our residents get the best quality of service with full transparency. I believe in smart, balanced, and controlled growth, which is harmonious with our existing neighborhoods. I would be honored to represent you on City Council. Please vote and support me. Please visit my website, rajforsantaclara.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahan, your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. It may be hard to believe, but sometimes I walk into this room not knowing what I'm going to say, and so it was tonight. This is our second forum, and I really felt like I said everything last week, but then I was talking to members in the audience. Particularly, I talked to one gentleman who asked me how someone young, how someone new in Santa Clara can become engaged in our city. And I realized that this election is really about Santa Clara's future. Past councils planned and built the Santa Clara we now enjoy. They put in the physical infrastructure, established sound fiscal practices, and laid a solid foundation. But Santa Clara is a progressive city, and we can't stand still. So, how do we plan and build the Santa Clara that our future generations, the millennials and beyond, how will we build the Santa Clara that they will enjoy? How do we move from mere transparency in government to real, engaged government, one that reaches all segments of our population? We have a senior advisory council. Why don't we get a young adult advisory council, someone to tell our council what their needs are, how we should build Santa Clara of the future? Can we build urban villages where Santa Clarans can live and work in the same locality, where daily commutes won't be necessary, where Wi-Fi connection is a given, where you can walk to neighborhood restaurants, where smaller units in complexes with common amenities are the preferred sort of housing? There's so much talk about transparency in government, but it's time to move beyond that. It's time to move into real engagement in local government. Communication is the first step. We need to communicate with our people, young and old, with our businesses, big and small, with our neighboring cities, so that we can cooperate in solving regional problems, and our state representatives so we can get what our city needs. The fate of our future goes beyond mere communication. We need to get to understanding the needs of our future Santa Clara.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. Mr. Bracamonte, good evening. Your 2-minute opening statement, sir.
Good evening. Once again, I'm Marcus Bracamonte, and I, like most of my generation, have ignored or been scared of the idea that I can make a change in this great city of ours. I've taken for granted the ability we have to voice our opinions. I have failed to do my part as a resident of Santa Clara to ensure a bright future for our home city. One morning I woke up and it felt in my heart the drive, the courage, and the strength to change that. Today I offer myself to be the voice of my generation and the voice of all generations, the voice of all the people of Santa Clara. As a city councilman, I will stand for what is right for the people, for what is right for the city, and for what is right for the environment. I will listen to the people. I will speak to the people, and I will remain the people. My overall mission is to ensure every generation has a chance to live in the city that we grew up in and raise our children here, and not be pushed out because we can't afford it. Moreover, I will ensure happiness and a sense of community once more. Vote for me, a byproduct of our school district and a son of Santa Clara. And on a side note, please work with me on the mic because it's on my blind side, so you can just yell at me if I need to get closer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bracamonte. We will begin the questioning. We'll work in the following order. Mr. Silva, Ms. Mahan, Mr. Chahal, Mr. Bracamonte. Here's the question. Long-term fiscal policy matters a lot for the city's overall financial health. What skills do you offer voters regarding fiscal issues?
Well, for one, I've been in human resources in corporate America for over 16 years. I've had to balance million-dollar budgets as I managed large HR departments, number one. Number two, I'm actually married to a vice president of finance at a company, corporate organization here in Santa Clara, which, for me, the great thing about that is that when I don't understand something, I can actually go and ask. And the interesting thing that I've learned over the past couple years of watching council members is that most of them don't have any, if very little, financial experience. When I went to an audit of Levi Stadium, it was the first audit of $1 billion stadium, and I sat in the subcommittee waiting to hear, waiting to get answers, and yet both of the council members who were representing you at this meeting had 0 questions, not one. And why is that? It's not because the audit was done perfectly, because obviously we know the audit wasn't done perfectly because we're auditing the audit now. And we're auditing the auditors. But it's because they had no financial understanding of how corporations run, how stadiums run, how large electrical companies within our city run, arguably how our budget runs. The answer has been, we are going to develop our way out of the financial woes. That has been the answer. And that's why you see all the development on the El Camino. That's why you see all the development in your backyard, because those individuals aren't creative and they don't have the means to figure out how to balance a budget, how to move forward, how to put money into the reserve, other than to do what we've always done, which is develop. At some point in time, we together have to find a different way to move this city forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahan, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Pleased to do so. Long-term fiscal policy matters a lot for the city's overall financial health. What skills do you offer voters regarding fiscal issues?
I'm a graduate of Santa Clara University School of Law, and I graduated from San Jose State University before that. I served on the board of a credit union for many years where I learned a lot of accounting principles, banking principles, and so forth. And I've been in the legal profession for 35 years and exposed to numerous kinds of cases, but I specialize in tax law, so it gives me a sound financial background in understanding laws related to fiscal responsibility and so forth. When I was on the council, every year I was on the council, we had a balanced budget. So I've learned how to balance the budget, and I know what you have to do, especially in tough times. I served through the 2 greatest economic downturns in our city's history, the first in 2001 after 9/11, and of course the second in 2008, beginning in 2008, the Great Recession, from which we are just now starting to emerge. So I know the kinds of cost-cutting measures you have to take. I know what it takes to balance a budget in hard times. I've also served on some of the best times when it was really easy to do everything you wanted. It was sort of an open checkbook time of government where we could build new libraries and do lots of things because there was lots of revenue coming in. Long-term, our city has a sound policy of using our city resources, our lands and so forth, to bring in revenues to our city. That's why Levi Stadium pays us rent. It's on our ground. That's why related companies will be paying us rent, bringing in revenues because it's on city land. Those kinds of fiscal policies are what's important, and I know how to implement those kinds of policies. When I left the City Council 2 years ago, we had a $92 million land reserve fund. Now it's down to, I don't know, I think $16 million with no accounting to our public what happened to all of that money. I favor having large reserves. We need them in downturn times. I favor having sound policies that make the most out of our enterprise funds, Silicon Valley Power, our land leases, et cetera.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. Mr. Chahal, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. 2 minutes.
So on this dais, I'm the one with an MBA degree in finance. And I run my business, I make my paychecks every month, and since 2005, my company is profitable and growing every year. So I have a lot of fiscal sense. And coming back to the city, I was the one person as a resident who came up to the council on a $6.5 billion related project. I studied the fiscal aspects of it. As per my fiscal analysis, we could have saved 110 acres of our land and just lost a little bit of amount. Instead of 20 million, we could have still made $17.83 million every year. And that 110 acres which we saved could have given us another same amount of revenue in coming years. We could have developed that. Now, any city or any business, we have to think about the long-term fiscal benefit of it. Not only the short term. We are doing all this development. Developers are coming up with the plan and they come up over here, they say, if we try to put affordability housing, they say, it's not fiscally sound for them. I'm the one on Planning Commission, I've started asking, give us your financial fiscal studies so that we can make sure that your plans are good or not. Look at some of the recent actions. Like, we came up with the swim center on our Central Park. You know the budget on that, $185 million. We have not projected any finances for it, and we are trying to approve that project. I would never have done that. I would make sure we funded the thing first and then approve the process. We already lost so many thousands of dollars. Another example, East Tasman. You know, we don't own the land. No single developer owns the land, and the city spent $500,000 to find out what we can build over there. This is not a fiscal responsible decision. It will not happen on my watch. I will make sure we make a sound fiscal decision down the line and for the future of for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bracamonte, would you like me to repeat the question, sir?
No, thank you, I got it.
Okay.
So I'm going to be 100% honest here. I have no fiscal or balancing experience other than balancing my own checkbook. I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you and to make myself look good. So every job has a learning curve, though. And for this, I will go to the experts and I'll listen to them and I'll learn from them. And most of all, I will also take it to the public because there's a lot of smart people in Santa Clara. And I'll listen to them hoping that they give me the advice that's best for the city as well. And I'm a good listener and a quick learner, so please don't let that scare you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question, the order of the answers will be Mr. Chahal, Mr. Bracamonte, Ms. Mahan, and Mr. Silva. Mr. Chahal, North Santa Clara residents lack, and this word was all in caps, nearby community recreation facilities and wellness programs. North Santa Clara residents have to travel too far for the city services more easily accessible to all other city residents. What will you do about this?
As a council member, I'll make sure our growth and our development is really balanced. And coming back to the north side, when the related project was here, I wanted to save that 110 acres of land. And you know what? That was the piece of land which we could have used for all these facilities we are talking about. We could have built a senior center over there. We could have built a good open space over there. And we could have done so many things with that 110 acres. And north side is giving us so much revenue out of that related project, as well as the stadium and all the business district over there, but they are lacking in what the attention we are trying to give them. Look at the traffic issues they will be facing from the related project. I would make sure that lot of the facility, they don't have any senior center. Their library was in doldrums. We almost lost that library, and I, along with my family, fought for that library. Although I don't live in north side, I fought for that library. The soccer park, the traffic issues over there, again, lot of issues. We fought for the soccer park also. So we have to balance these things. Let's not concentrate or do a development which is not balanced out. Let's give the due share or respect the citizens' on the north side, and make sure they have their own police station, at least small police station, senior center, and a youth activity center. I'm on council, I'll make sure I appropriate for those and make sure they get it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahan?
Thank you. Couple of things. The first is that the Related Companies project on our municipal golf course, it's 240 acres. That holds the promise, I should say, of providing some of the recreational facilities, wellness programs, and other things that Northside needs. When we built Rivermark, we did include substantial open space. We have a public park, public library, there's a lot of amenities in Rivermark, but there's the north side, the traditional north side of Santa Clara is a little bit divorced from Rivermark, but the Related Companies offer an opportunity to make sure that we get those kinds of things put in place to serve the entire north side. The EIR has been approved by the City Council, so in some sense it's a done deal. However, the bigger steps are yet to come in the form of the disposition and development agreement. How is that project exactly going to play out? How is it going to be phased in? Where will the open space go? They promised 30 acres of open space, but where does that go? What does that look like? What's going to be on that open space? It's city-owned land, so we have control of these elements. Much like we did with Rivermark, through the disposition and development process, we get control of these kinds of things. Where do we put in the public facilities, and what will those be? So these are going to be important decisions going forward. And this is where I would like to bring my experience to the council, because I was on the council when we developed Rivermark. And by all accounts, it's turned out pretty well. As far as park fees go, it ties into this a little bit. I oppose park fees not because I wanted to slow down development or I was afraid it was going to slow down development, not because it costs developers, but because it costs you, the consumer, the homeowner, the renter. When you add $30,000 a unit to any developer building housing in Santa Clara, the developer doesn't pay it. Sure, he may pay it up front, but the homeowner pays it when he writes the check for the down payment to buy that house, or when you write your monthly check to pay your rent. It's amortized over the life of the term of your lease. So the renters and the homeowners pay those fees, and it should be a general fund function to pay for our parks.
Thank you. Mr. Bracamonte, would you like me to repeat the question, sir?
Yes, please.
Certainly. North Santa Clara residents lack nearby community recreation facilities and wellness programs. North Santa Clara residents have to travel too far for the city services more easily accessible to all other city residents. What will you do about this?
Well, my simple answer is to build more. In the high-density projects we keep approving, we can have the policies where the developers pay, like the park fees, and I would support that. I think it's important for our parks and open space, and we also need to require the developer to build a truly mixed-use facility. We stop amending the general plan and granting variances that prevents them from actually going through and building a mixed use where that side of town, north side, doesn't have to travel so far to do anything recreational or anything at all, really. Let's see. And keeping our open space is really important. Even trying to get more open space. Open space is beautiful, and even just looking at it for me is relaxing. It's really important for an environment, and I think we truly need to protect it and even grow it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Silva.
Thank you. I actually, believe it or not, grew up on the north side, right, with a very good friend of mine, Doug Campbell, who lived on Clyde. And I remember as kids, we basically had two things to do: swim in his pool and go to the one tennis court that they had tucked away in a park and play tennis for hours on end. We have neglected the north side, and we've neglected the north side in a very bad way. I do agree that the related project is going to bring amenities, but it's not going to bring amenities for all families. Not everybody's going to be able to afford to go to the related project because of the nature of the project and spend money. We need to look at the entire community, number one. Number two, with the 30 acres and the $5 million being spent, I would encourage citizens to step forward and let the council and the Park and Rec Commission know what it is that they want and the amenities that they want. Third, Montague Park is slated to be overhauled. My proposal, given all of the sacrifices the North Side has made over the last couple of years, especially with dumping the stadium in their backyard, is to move Montague Park up. And that way we can actually change and we can actually make and put in the amenities that so many families want for their kids. Right now, Montague Park and Montague Pool, as many of you know, are in really bad shape. But you know, I agree with Ms. Mahan on one point, and that is that you have paid for 30 years of not collecting a fee for park recovery in Santa Clara. You have paid. You've paid by having an international swim center that's 50 years old. I've paid by having a neighborhood park, Steve Carley, that's 62 years old. We've all paid with our parkland, and we've all suffered. Our parks are in dire shape, and only a handful of them have actually been renovated. But the fact of the matter is, how is the general plan done as far as funding parks in Santa Clara? Has the general plan adequately funded parks in Santa Clara? The answer is no. And going forward, that's exactly why I was an advocate for 100% cost recovery, because the general plan has no way and never will be able to fix our ailing park system.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. The next question that we're taking, submitted by the audience, the order in which we'll ask for you to respond is Ms. Mahan, Mr. Silva, Mr. Chahal, Mr. Bracamonte. Ms. Mahan, what's your opinion regarding VTA's proposed I'm going to try this again. What is your opinion regarding VTA's proposed lane closure on El Camino Real?
The VTA's lane closure proposal on El Camino Real, they're trying to get all of the cities involved in what they call bus rapid transit, BRT. In order for BRT to work, you need to dedicate lanes just to the buses, and it has to run the whole length of El Camino through our county. We don't have that cooperation, number one. But more importantly, I believe it will adversely affect all of our businesses on El Camino Real. We are actually losing prime commercial land on El Camino Real now to all of these high-density housing projects. Our former city manager promised when I was still on the council that the intersections, the major intersections, would be preserved for commercial development, and yet what has the council recently done? Going to put a massive housing development where Moonlight Bowling Alley is. Again, one of the prime intersections on El Camino should be preserved for commercial development. So if you enact BRT along our section of El Camino, people aren't going to be able to get across, to get to businesses. They're going to be hurt. It's not going to help traffic congestion. El Camino is a prime mover through our city to other cities, a prime connector. It goes ultimately to our transit hub at the railroad station. To take out 2 lanes and try to crowd the same number of cars in fewer lanes is going to drive that same traffic then to other arteries, Benton Street for one, Cabrillo for one, and this is what's going to cause even greater traffic problems, not solve traffic problems. We don't want our El Camino to be a bottleneck. So really until other cities get on board with this whole project, and until we can come up with some good alternatives, if you are going to divert traffic capacity off of El Camino, come up with some alternative traffic plans to show where that traffic's going to go.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. Mr. Silva, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay. Personally, I really don't care if other cities get on board with wanting to dedicate a lane on the El Camino for buses. I can emphatically say that I think it's one of the most ridiculous proposals and ideas that I've actually heard in the last 5 years. To think that we would take a 3-lane street like El Camino and dedicate a lane to buses so they can have a thoroughfare through our city is, I think, insane. Probably is the best characterization that I can come up with. Number one, it comes down to quality of life. Right now, I live on San Tomas and Benton. Right now, I can't make a right turn onto San Tomas from Benton because of all the construction. It takes me 5 minutes to make a right-hand turn. How long do you think it's going to take you to make a right-hand turn if you have a lane that's dedicated simply for buses? This proposal would work in New York, in San Francisco, and Chicago, where cities are set up for rapid transit to actually move people from point A to point B. But you know, when I heard of this proposal, I did kind of a little pseudo study, and I just kind of watched and looked inside the buses, the 522 and the 22, and I looked at the number of people that were actually on the bus. And more times than not, there was no more than 3 or 4. So we would actually ask citizens where thousands of cars every hour, thousands of people every hour, are going to move, as Patty said, and I wholeheartedly agree with her, through a very major thoroughfare in our city, and we're going to reserve that lane for 5. It makes no sense. So with that, I think you know my position on this issue.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chahal, would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Recently, I was at the VTA Measure B meeting, and this came up over there too. So look at the situation we are in currently right now. Our traffic situation for each resident is already horrible. One of the major issues our residents are facing, traffic congestion, which causes environment effects and all that stuff. I've talked to businesses on El Camino and told them, hey, this is something coming up. None of them was agreeing to this thing. And as mentioned by my co-candidates, if we close those lines, it will be horrible for us. And look at the situation we are in now. We have a double-decker buses, and hardly you find 5 to 10 people sitting on those. And even at the VTA conference, I asked them, it's not only important to have a traffic from one longitudinal effect only. What happens is, where we are missing on the VTA public transport is the last mile travel. If I get down at Santa Clara University and if I have to go to Intel office, you may imagine how can I go it. It's very horrible. The last mile travel is very horrible. So looking at those, instead of doing these things, our VTA system has to look at how we can make it, the current system is more efficient. Look at the cities in Florida and Colorado. They're coming up with the progressive options, like they're using Uber. Public transportation as Uber. You know how much public funding we can save if we can just use Uber as a small buses as a public? They call them as a need basis. It's a huge fiscal benefit to the cities as well as to the VT agency. Like, we are coming up with all these measures and we are spending so much money, but we are not planning or we are not being progressive how we can use the technology down the line. So I'm not in favor of it as it stands now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bracamonte, would you like me to repeat the question, sir?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, like Mr. Silva, I believe it's a pretty crazy idea, especially for this point in time in our city. It will cause more traffic. It would be a great idea if El Camino was wider and more people used the bus. I live on Monroe, and I hear all the time how people are annoyed that they can't back out of their driveway at certain times of the day. Even one man telling me that he has to set a time cushion to back out of his driveway to take his kids to school down the street. Now imagine how much worse it's going to get for streets like Monroe if El Camino is backed up, especially like Mr. Silva's area. San Tomas is going to be more backed up. Benton's going to be more backed up because it's going to be backed up on Monroe. It's going to be a trickle effect. It's not a good idea. So I am against it. I really believe if that were to pass, it would really send traffic deep into residential areas worse than it already is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll move to question number 4, and the order in terms of answering this question, we'll start with Mr. Silva, Ms. Mahan, Mr. Bracamonte, Mr. Chahal. Mr. Silva, the question is this. Recently, the City Council passed both a calendaring and lobbying ordinance to help the city government to become more open and transparent. Are you in support of these ordinances? And what would you do to help further the goal of transparency in local government?
Thank you. That's a great question. Actually, when we were having the discussion of transparency, I came to the council and spoke on numerous occasions about the importance of transparency. One of the things that our city got away from over the past 4 years, and which we're finally putting back, is honesty and transparency. I think Mayor Gilmore has done a phenomenal job of wrangling the council members back together and putting forth an effort that I think citizens can be proud of, in the fact that she's doing everything within her power to help us become more transparent. You as citizens have every right to know who I talk to as your council member. You have a right to know who I talk to, when I talk to them, and quite frankly, what I talk to them about. It's imperative that if this council is ever going to regain the trust of the citizens, that transparency become more than just a word. We have to do it in our word and in our deed. Going forward, how would I support it? It's simple. I don't have an agenda to hide. I've been on the Parks and Rec Commission for 5 years. I've never tried to hide anything on the agenda, and if I have, I've certainly apologized and of course made sure that it was put on the next agenda. I have some fellow Park and Rec commissioners in the room, and I'm sure they could vouch for that. Again, my goal in coming onto this council is to fix a lot of what has been wrong and what has been, unfortunately, has kind of paralyzed this council. But before we can fix ourselves, one of the main things we need to fix is the relationship with you. Because I go out and talk to people every day, 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day on the weekend, and I'll tell you, at least 25% of the people that I talk to fundamentally think that the council cannot be trusted and that they have something to hide. Transparency, open government, that's the only way we're going to get the respect back from our citizens.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahan, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thanks. You know, the calendar ordinance and the lobbying ordinance may have been very well intentioned, but they have some severe flaws. For instance, the calendaring ordinance, it requires the publication online of all of the meetings that council members have with anyone, except with other council members. So the council, the public as a whole, has no idea when council members meet with other council members outside of our publicly noticed meetings. Also, the calendar as published is retrospective, not prospective. So you don't know what they're going to do. You only know what they've done after it's already been done. The most recent posting on the calendars is August 30th. So there's a whole month of meetings gone by when nobody has known what's gone on. The mayor recently had an audit committee, an ad hoc committee. She said it didn't need a public notice, so they had a meeting with no notice to the public at all. And of course, it didn't appear on the calendars because it hadn't occurred yet. She changed her position on that, thankfully. I had a personal experience, of course, with the lobbying ordinance, which an independent counsel had to come to the conclusion, and I quote, "Any failure on my part to register as a lobbyist did not constitute a knowing violation of the ordinance that would subject me to penalties because I had a reasonable and good faith belief that I was covered by the attorney exemption." If lobbying is going to be in the eye of the beholder, then why would a council member who thought she was being lobbied on May 23rd accept a trip from me that included free meals, free lodging, free use of my car, in excess of any even state regulation which allows $460 worth of gifts, but our lobbying ordinance from the city says, and I quote, "It is unlawful for any city official to accept any gift from a lobbyist." So if she thinks I'm a lobbyist, why does she take the gifts? Or maybe the truth is, she really doesn't think I'm a lobbyist.
Thank you. Mr. Bracamonte, would you like me to repeat the question, sir?
No, thank you. So I would support these ordinances. I think they're great, and to further transparency for the city, I would be honest. I would not hide anything because I have no reason to hide anything. And I'm against closed meetings like the one that approved the related project. I probably wouldn't even go in the room. I don't like hidden agendas. I will keep in constant communication with the public. It's not going to stop after campaigning season. I will talk to you. I'll answer any question you ever have, of course, if I can, honestly. And I will set a new standard of what a council member should stand for, and that's the truth. And that truth is that the council works for you, and I won't forget that. And I think that helps transparency too. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chahal, repeat the question.
Good, thank you.
Please do so.
One of the pillars of democracy is that we have to be very transparent and be open with our residents. And one of the top agenda of my campaign is how we can involve, inform, and consult the residents. And this ties into what we are talking about over here. Calendaring and lobbying ordinance. Our campaign finance laws we did something, but they're even worse, like they're not so good. All these things, they're coming up, and we are doing something better than what we have been doing in the past, but we can add more teeth to it. You know, we have a Brown Act. I, as a planning commissioner, I've never ever violated a Brown Act. I always disclose if I met the developer or even if I met the resident, anybody. So we have to add teeth to these things. Calendaring, like, we can make it so simple, like Hossam is relaying all these videos on Facebook. How can not our city do much better job than that? That's something we can easily do it. Technology is so cheap and so affordable, we can add all these things. Like, we don't have to wait for agenda for weeks or so. Even pre-agenda meetings, I would suggest that when a process starts with somebody as a developer, they should be pre-agendized, and information we are gathering at initial stage has to be shared with the residents, so the residents can give their own input in these aspects. So my idea is we have to be much more open with our residents, share as much as information as we can, whether it's financial, whether it's square footage of a development, or where the development would be. These are some very important aspects. And if we want to have a greater aspect of our democracy and we want to win the confidence of our residents, we will have to do this. And that engagement between the residents is an important part going forward and getting a better council on this dais. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Candidates, we've arrived at closing statements, and we will go in the reverse order that we went with regard to opening statements. These statements will be 2 minutes in length, and we will begin with Mr. Bracamonte. Mr. Bracamonte.
Thank you. I like to believe that every candidate is up here for the good of Santa Clara. So I will never knock any of my opponents down, but continue to be honored to be part of such great company. Because in the end, they are my neighbors and fellow Santa Clarans. We must rethink the decisions of rezoning and housing development. Progress is great and change is inevitable. But when we knock down a bowling alley to build new homes, we must have a plan to replace that source of entertainment for all generations. We must keep balance of homes, businesses, and entertainment, which are the necessities of running a harmonized community. This brings me to my next point. I, as many will agree, believe that Santa Clara has lost its sense of community. At the beginning of the year, we had the countdown to the Super Bowl events, and they were fun. I know all my friends look forward to them, and we didn't miss a single one. We looked forward to them as we do July 4th in Central Park, and the Santa Clara's Art and Wine Festival, and even the Christmas tree lighting, now that it's grown bigger. But I maybe, and even you, want more. More events to bring us together and rebuild a bigger, better community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mahan.
Thank you. A friend of mine in the audience tonight related to me that in electing a council member, the candidate's resume is important. So I want to share mine with you. I'm an attorney in private practice for the past 35 years, specializing in estate planning and tax law. Before that, I taught English and speech in junior high school. Yes, it was called junior high school then, and high school. It was that long ago. I graduated from San Jose State University with distinction, with degrees and credentials in speech communication and English. The hardest job I ever had was my first, as a waitress at the old Grants, which morphed into Mervyn's, now Target. I learned what it meant to hustle and work really hard because I had to make a lot of tips to pay for the gas in my car. I've served the city as mayor from 2002 to 2010 and as councilperson for 3 terms. I can bring that experience to the council at a time when I believe it's needed. I served as president of the Santa Clara County Cities Association for 2 years and on its board for 8. I learned and gained experience in regional cooperation and governance. For many years, I served on the board of a local credit union where I learned a great deal about finance and accounting, skills that will assist me in understanding the city's complex budget and keeping it balanced. I'm involved as a volunteer in many Santa Clara nonprofit organizations, the Santa Clara Women's Club, Mission City Community Fund, the Santa Clara Cities Association, the Santa Clara Historic Home Tour, the Seroptimus International of Silicon Valley, the Old Quad Residents Association. I believe wholeheartedly in the words of Mother Teresa, now Saint Teresa of Calcutta. We may not all be able to do great things, but all of us can do small things with great love. I stay involved in public and nonprofit service because I have a great love for the city of Santa Clara. I hope to have the chance to prove that once again in the upcoming 4 years.
Thank you, Ms. Mahan. Mr. Chahal.
Dear residents, before you vote, as Ms. Mahan said, you have to check out each candidate. I would encourage you all to go to my website, rajforsantaclara.com, and check out my track record and my service to the community. I'm the most analytical, independent, and collaborative candidate on this ballot. This community has helped me raise a great family, and only reason I'm running on this election is to truly give back what you all as a community have given me and my family. I'm not taking any special interest money. My only special interest is to represent you all, the residents. I hope to do this in the most transparent, diligent way I can. The other day, I was talking to a resident and she told me that despite being a lifelong resident of Santa Clara, her voice is not being heard. She was very frustrated with the high-density housing approved right in her backyard. It was disheartening to hear that she said, under protest, she will not shop in Santa Clara anymore. Rather, she will go to Santana Row or outside of the city. This is just another example of how disconnected our decision-making has become. I'll do my best to involve all residents into our decision-making process. My goal is to have a city with happy residents rather than frustrated ones. Let's concentrate to improve the life of our ordinary residents by eliminating inappropriate high-density housing or traffic congestions. Because of my constant advocacy for open space, I'm the only candidate endorsed by the Sierra Club. Let us concentrate on improving basic infrastructure and services. Let us stop the top-down approach of planning and start bottoms-up approach. With my collaborative approach, I plan to get 3 things done in my first year on the council. Update the general plan so that our residents have a clear understanding of upcoming developments. Have a defined policy on affordable housing so that no developer can refuse to say they cannot afford housing. Bring TDM penalties, policy to reduce traffic congestion. With your vote, I promise to bring residents back to power on the council. Please check out my website, rajforsantaclara.com. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Silva.
Thank you. I know it's tough to get to know us in 2 minutes, and it's tough for us to try to sell you in 2 minutes. So I'll do the best I can. You know, I fundamentally think Santa Clara is a unique city that's facing a lot of challenges, and the question you have to ask yourself is whether or not you're going to elect candidates that cater to big business by giving large sweetheart land deals, or if you're going to elect a candidate who will no longer allow Santa Clara to be the low-cost city to do business in. Our city can no longer afford both big business and the Niners to buy their way onto our council. In the 2014 election, the Niners tried to hide a $70,000 expenditure in a PAC, which in turn was used to pay for mailers for candidates they supported. This resulted in the mayor and 3 other council members trying to sign over an 11-acre state-of-the-art soccer park and a backroom deal for pennies on the dollar within a few months of being sworn in. Ironically, both the mayor and the city manager who brokered this deal have since quit. Although I don't make many promises, one promise I can make to you tonight is that I won't allow our council to return to the chaos and disarray of 4 years ago, when many of our citizens began losing trust in our elected officials. I won't quit when times get tough. I won't quit when I don't get my way. I'll stay and fight to fix what's broke and champion what's not. I'll do my best to remember that serving our community is an honor and a privilege that not many people in life get a chance to do. I can't promise you we'll always agree, but I can promise you that I'll listen, and perhaps we'll agree to disagree. As we move forward towards Election Day, unfortunately, there are some that will do everything in their power to have you think less of me. Before I received the blessing from my wife to run for city council, I reminded her that you'll know if I'm doing well by how hard they try to tear me down. She reminded me that there's a lot wrong with government today, but it's not because of bad people, but because of the silence of good people. Together, let's not remain silent over the next 6 weeks. Let's work together to build a better and prosperous Santa Clara. I'm seeking your vote for City Council, and you can learn more about me by going to my website at tinosilva.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Would you thank these candidates, please? Thank you. That brings us very near the end of this evening's festivities. Tomorrow night we'll return here again at 6 o'clock for a meet and greet, followed at 7 o'clock by candidates for the 3 other city council seats that are up for election on November 8th. That is council seats 3, 6, and 7. If you are watching this or looking at this on the internet, you can send questions to scvotes@santaclaraca.gov, and we will do our best to ask those tomorrow evening. On behalf of the Santa Clara Votes program, thank you and good night.
It's always an honor, guys. It's always an honor.